Right now, I'm standing next to a canal that delivers water to millions of people in Arizona. It's part of a complex physical and legal system built on assumptions about the Colorado River made more than a century ago. And unfortunately for me and the millions of other people living in the Colorado River Basin, those assumptions turned out to be wrong. Welcome to Lab Coat Optional from Arizona State University, the show where advanced research meets everyday curiosity. I'm your host, Pete Zrioka, and this week we're diving into water policy, which might sound not too exciting until you realize that it affects everything from housing costs to your groceries to the cost of electricity, and yeah, whether or not you can enjoy a salad in February.
2026 will be one of the most consequential years in the history of Western water law. And the reason is that December 31st of 2026, the rules that govern how the states share the Colorado River when there's not enough water will expire. There is no deal in place despite lots of efforts to negotiate. And whatever happens this year, it will set the table for how we manage this resource going forward. And that's 40 million people's water supply.
That's Rhett Larson, the Richard Morrison Professor of Water Law at ASU's Sandra Day O'Connor College of Law. He's also a senior research fellow at the Kyle Center for Water Policy. He spent his career researching water law across the globe, from the Middle East to South Africa to the Colorado River Basin, and he's directly involved in the conversations shaping Arizona's water future. In this episode, Rhett breaks down what's at stake if states fail to agree to new rules, why there are no heroes, villains, or easy fixes in this story, and the questions at the center of it all. Which futures do we want to prioritize, and which ones are we prepared to let go?
Rhett, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
You're a lawyer by trade, but how did you become interested in environmental and resource law?
Well, a few ways. First of all, I'm from Yuma, Arizona originally.
I used to live in Yuma.
Oh, did you?
I was stationed there.
Oh, great. Yeah, well, this goes right into my story. So growing up in Yuma, which if people aren't familiar with Yuma, it was a small town, and Yuma's grown a lot. But when I was a kid, it was a fairly small agricultural town right on the Colorado River, and right where Arizona, California, and Mexico meet on the Colorado River, right where the Colorado River crosses from the United States into Mexico. And where I grew up, it seemed like every grown-up I knew only had one of two jobs. You were either a farmer or you were a soldier. And both of those jobs I thought were really scary. So the job that I knew of that wasn't a farmer or a soldier was our irrigation district's water lawyer. And I thought, well, that's the only job a grown-up has that isn't terrifying. And he was this very eminent figure in the community. So I've been interested in water law and policy ever since I was a little kid growing up in Yuma. And I tell people growing up in Yuma, real political power is your irrigation district. Like those people wield real power. Some guy in the White House isn't all that important, but who's opening the gates to your ditch is a very powerful person. But later in my life, I was living in the Dominican Republic, and I survived a Category 5 hurricane. And in the wake of that hurricane, and all the rescue and rebuilding efforts, one of the things I learned was every problem on Earth is easier if you have enough clean water and not too much dirty water. And no problem on Earth is solvable if you can't get clean water and you don't have enough of it.
So let's talk about the agreement that currently governs the Colorado River, the Colorado River Compact. Can you give me I know this is a tall ask. Can you give me a brief history of it? Who are the stakeholders? Why does it matter right now?
Sure. So Western water law is governed by a kind of law called prior appropriation. And it's basically calling shotgun. So first person to get there and grab the water has a superior claim to anybody else who comes after him. So if some guy shows up in 1890 and takes a bunch of water out of the river and uses it to, takes 10 acre feet out of the water and uses it to irrigate corn, and somebody later comes out and takes 10 acre feet to irrigate wheat, and one year there's only 2 acre feet, the guy who got there first gets 2 acre feet, the guy who got there second gets nothing. One year there's 12 acre feet, first guy gets all 10 of his, the second guy only gets 2. So that's how water law works, generally speaking. Well, California,
It's dibs.
Dibs, exactly.
Okay.
Well, California was growing really fast in the early part of the 20th century, and all of the other states that share the Colorado River Basin, Arizona, Nevada, Colorado, Utah, Wyoming, New Mexico, they were all nervous that all of these people were arriving first in California and gobbling up the water. And so they said, well, we need to create a rule that keeps it so that California doesn't just gobble up the entire river. And so in 1922, the states got together and agreed to the Colorado River Compact. Now, the Colorado River Compact is really important, but it actually does surprisingly little. All it does is it draws a line between two sub-basins of the Colorado River. It draws that line at a place called Lee Ferry, which is right around the Grand Canyon here in Arizona. Everything upstream of Lee Ferry is the upper basin. Everything downstream of Lee Ferry is the lower basin. So upper basin is Colorado, Utah, Wyoming, and New Mexico. Lower basin is Nevada, Arizona, California, and Mexico. Now, all it really did is say you get 7.5 million acre feet for the upper basin, and you get 7.5 million acre feet for the lower basin. Now, for people who are listening, acre foot is about 326,000 gallons of water, or it's about 1,233 cubic meters of water. It is 1 acre flooded to 1 foot deep.
So if we're going to visualize that, that's like about a football field?
Like a football field flooded to 1 foot deep of water.
Okay.
If right now you're going, why in the world are we measuring water that way? Because we're Americans. And we like to find the weirdest possible way to measure something and then stick with that to drive everybody else in the world crazy. Because we get 20 rods to the hogshead in this country, and that's how we like it.
I'm meeting the stereotype because I immediately went to a football field.
Right.
And not something
I know the
rest of the world would understand.
We're going to use some dumb, sensible thing like the metric system.
Well, who needs it?
Right. Stupid, sensible scientists in Europe.
Come on.
So what we do is we just split the river in half, basically. You just pulled a King Solomon, 7.5 million acre feet for the upper basin, 7.5 million acre feet for the lower basin. The problem with the Colorado River Compact is that in 1922, the measurements that they took of the river to decide how much water is in the river was during flood years. So they already assumed that there was more water in the river than is usually there. So in 1944, we guaranteed Mexico 1.5 million acre feet. So 7.5 million acre feet to the upper basin, plus 7.5 million acre feet to the lower basin, plus 1.5 million acre feet to Mexico. Every year we lose about 1.5 million acre feet to evaporation. Add it all together, the Colorado River Compact, the cornerstone of the river, of the law of the river, says that there's 18 million acre feet in the river every year.
Right.
The problem is that was based on flood data. We know from tree ring analysis that the average 1,000 years amount of water in the river is about 13.5 million acre feet. So even if you could wave a magic wand and make climate change disappear, the Colorado River Compact still guarantees more water than the normal river can almost ever pay out.
5 million acre feet more? Sorry, it was 18 and then...
About 5 million acre feet more than is normally in the river.
And that's, again, not accounting for what we lose.
Not accounting for climate change.
And evaporation.
Right.
Okay, so those are some not great assumptions that it made. What else was left out of the compact? You mentioned Mexico. They get 1.5 million acre feet. Was anyone else left out of these negotiations?
So the Colorado River Compact guessed that someday Mexico would enter the fray. So there's parts of the Colorado River Compact that say, well, we know someday there's going to be a treaty with Mexico, but that didn't happen until 1944. But at least it contemplated that Mexico would be there. One of the things the Colorado River Compact completely failed to do was to bring Native American tribes to the table. So it was really only in 1922 the state governments that were at the table negotiating. Sovereign tribal jurisdictions weren't at the table. And the reason that that's important is, like I just said, first in time, first in right. It's calling dibs. Well, who called dibs first in the Colorado River Basin? Indigenous people, the people who've been here for generations. And the law, not perfectly, but largely recognizes that. The priority date for most Native American tribes is the date of their reservation, and most of those reservations are well into the 19th century, so it puts them at or near the front of the line.
Sure.
Well, imagine having a negotiation over how we're going to share water, and a lot of the jurisdictions with the highest priority water weren't even at the table negotiating. And so that has set up another challenge that this cornerstone of water management excluded some of the most important and senior water right holders that were in the basin. And not only that, but excluded cultures that had a familiarity with the river that a lot of these newcomers didn't. Had we had more Native American tribes at the table, they might have been able to say, you guys are assuming that this river's got way more water than it really does.
It's a
My
flood year.
great-great-grandparents have been managing this river. They know what the river normally looks like.
But has the compact evolved over time? I mean, it's been in effect for more than 100 years now. Has it been updated?
So the compact itself has not been updated.
Okay.
However, we talk about the law of the river. So all Colorado River nerds will say, you'll hear them say the law of the river. The law of the river is a complex interplay of lots of different statutes, treaties, contracts, agency guidelines. The cornerstone of it is the Colorado River Compact in 1922. But in 1928, we have the Boulder Canyon Project Act, which does several things. 1944, we have the Rivers Treaty between the United States and Mexico. In 1948, we have the Upper Basin Compact. In 1968, we have the Colorado River Basin Project Act. So every few years, 1963, we have the big Supreme Court decision in Arizona v. California. So every few years, the law of the river is expanded and nuanced. So while the compact itself has remained basically the same since 1922.
Splitting the
whole
basins.
series of laws have been built upon that foundation.
And that series of laws and those agreements on top of the compact, that's what's expiring at the end of this year.
Well, the thing that's specifically expiring is in the early part of the 2000s, we were experiencing a drought and people were really struggling. And there was a sense of, we're no longer managing surplus in this river basin. We're only going to be managing shortage.
Okay.
And around 2005, there was a concern that said, hey, California, you guys have been counting on a bunch of states not using their water. You guys got to stop doing that. You guys got to get yourself down to only what your right is. And so what happened is that we negotiated the Department of the Interior shortage sharing guidelines in 2007 that said, when there isn't enough water, this is how you will share in that shortage across the entire river basin. And in 2007, it said this new regime will last until midnight of December 31st, 2026. And so that shortage sharing regime is what is going to expire. And what that shortage sharing regime does is it basically says, between the two upper basins, we're going to measure shortage as an elevation of Lake Mead. And so the further Lake Mead drops, the more cuts individual states will take as the level of Lake Mead falls. So for example, right now we are in a tier 1 shortage, which means Lake Mead is below 1,075 feet above sea level.
Okay.
As it drops, we will take more and more shortage. Now, there was something added on in 2019 called the Drought Contingency Plan, which adds even more layers of cuts because we were facing even greater shortages in the basin. But everything that happened since 2007, including the 2019 Drought Contingency Plan, all of these rules that govern how we share the river when there's not enough water, they all expire.
So where are negotiations right now? I know that's a very complicated question.
In the toilet.
Great.
So not that complicated.
Cool. All right.
Every year, there's a big conference in Las Vegas called CRUA, the Colorado River Water Users Association. It's held usually in the middle of December every year in Las Vegas. Everybody who's a Colorado River nerd goes. And it was bleak. Normally the politics of the Colorado River Basin has largely been everybody's afraid of California. So California is the biggest, it's the strongest, it's the one with the most money, it's the one with the largest congressional delegation. So everybody's afraid of California's power.
Yeah.
They're what we call the hydrohegemon, the big bully in the river. And every river basin has a hydrohegemon, a big bully. And sometimes people think, oh, well, the United States of America is the big bully in the Colorado River Basin. No, California is the big bully. They're really big and powerful. But the politics have shifted in the last couple of years, and the politics now are very much upper basin against lower basin. So Arizona, California, and Nevada have united, and the 4 upper basin states have united, and there's a massive gap between their 2 negotiating positions right now, and it has not made any progress for probably 18 months, and it seems like it's pretty much at a standstill.
What happens if the upper basin states and lower basin states don't come to an agreement?
The ideal situation is that everybody comes to an agreement. That doesn't seem likely right now, but it's been a really bad winter. And there's a certain silver lining to bad hydrology, which is if we have a really dry winter, there may be enough fear in the individual states to be like, you know what, we got to pull together because this is really scary. We pulled together in 2019 with the Drought Contingency Plan because things were really scary. things get really scary again, you may see us pull together. If we don't, what would be really helpful is for the federal government to just start swinging its elbows and impose something on us. Because either they'll impose something good or good enough that we can live with, or they'll impose something bad and it will unite the states against a common enemy.
Okay.
So either way, it would be really good if the federal government came in, showed some leadership, and said, hey, if you guys aren't going to come to an agreement, we're just going to impose something on you. It's also possible that we all just start suing each other. If we all sue each other, there might be an upside in that sometimes litigation is a catalyst for settlement. It forces people to negotiate. But sometimes, and more often than not, especially in these big interstate water disputes, litigation ends up being a quagmire and it just slows everything down. If that happens, if we all sue each other and it isn't a catalyst for settlement, and the federal government doesn't step in and impose a system either that we can live with or that unites us against the federal government, then it's the Thunderdome as far as how we share the river.
Earlier, you mentioned how California has historically been the hydro hegemon in this entire process. And now the battle lines have been drawn between the upper basin states and lower basin states. What specifically has changed to realign the states in this way? Is it just the drought?
I think it is a realization that the interests of the lower basin states have something much more in common than the interests of the upper basin states. It used to be this fear of this extra powerful jurisdiction. The concern now is that the fastest growing jurisdictions, the ones that are the largest economic engines, the ones that are producing the most food, the ones that are producing the most wealth, the ones with the cities that are growing the fastest, are all in the lower basin.
Okay.
And so the upper basin, meanwhile, has never grown into its full 7.5 million acre foot allocation. So the upper basin's argument is, hey, the Colorado River Compact gave us 7.5 million acre feet. We should be able to grow into that full amount. And that's an understandable argument. The lower basin's argument is, if you guys were going to grow into it, you've had a century and you haven't. And we need that water and we're growing fast. The other argument has been, listen, the lower basin, because we have been the ones that have been growing the fastest and using the most water, the lower basin has taken the brunt of shortage. So Arizona, by far, has been the jurisdiction that has taken the most mandatory cuts. And now the lower basin's going, hey guys, we take a lot of mandatory cuts down here. Like, we're forced to take cuts and they hurt a lot of people. If you see a Pinal County farmer, give them $20 and a hug, because it's hard to be a farmer in Pinal County right now.
Noted.
The upper basin has no mandatory cuts, and they are saying we will never take mandatory cuts. So that is really like the big divide right now. I'm going to own my biases. Like, sometimes I'll have people who, journalists who will contact me and they go, oh, well, we love to talk to a water law scholar like you because you're unbiased. I am not unbiased.
You heard it here.
I'm a proud Arizonan and I own my biases. I'm super biased in favor of Arizona. But as a scholar, I have to listen carefully and really try to understand the upper basin's argument. And I think the upper basin's argument is, we were guaranteed 7.5 million acre feet. We need to have a chance to grow into it. We still have people who aren't getting their water. We face shortage. We just don't face it in a sort of command and control legal way, the way that you guys do. And I think that's kind of their argument, which is an understandable argument. It's just, at some point in time, there has to be a point where they go, you know what? The river is so small and so dry that even we are required to not take water.
So remind me, the things that are the agreements that are expiring this year, those were put into place in the early 2000s, or was that in 2019?
In 2007, but then they were sort of added on to in 2019.
Okay, so that makes me wonder. I mean, it gives me an idea, but how far out are states planning for water right now, and how far out should we be planning for water?
So this is an excellent question, and it's one of the real frustrations around the stalled negotiations, which is water planning is something that has decades in terms of its planning horizons. To develop infrastructure, to expand, to build or expand a dam, to drill new well fields, to install new pipelines, to build new treatment plants. This isn't the kind of thing you can do in 8 months.
Yeah.
It's the kind of thing that's going to take decades, especially if what you're thinking about are, desalination plants or water recycling plants. And so cities, real estate developers, Native American tribes, farmers, they all need to have long-term planning horizons. And that's one of the reasons why in 2007, when this regime was built, it was like, hey, we're going to give this 20 years to survive. One possible risk in these negotiations is, imagine, and I think that based on the people I know and have talked to, this is possible. Imagine the Colorado River negotiators get together and they go, you know what, we're not getting along and this is stalled. So let's just put a Band-Aid on this thing for 5 years. Let's just say for 5 years, we have a little thing that we can all kind of live with. We'll tweak the rules we're living with now and we'll buy ourselves some more time to negotiate. You can see why that's a really attractive thing. It's easier to get a deal like that across the finish line than it is to get a 20 or 30 or 50-year deal. But there's real dangers with taking that approach because now you have a bunch of city planners and all of these other people, these major economic drivers who are going, so we can't make plans any further out than 5 years?
Yeah.
So we need to have something that people can have decades worth of a rule that they can live with. I'm afraid that the negotiations are going so badly that we will have to live with a temporary Band-Aid solution. And the problem with Band-Aids is sooner or later you take enough showers, they come off.
So they've just been kicking the can down the road for the past 20 years, it sounds like.
Well, for the last 20 years, they've been living with a regime. And in these 20 years, we should have been negotiating and coming up with what the next 20, 30, 50-year plan should have been.
So we haven't even been kicking the can.
Well,
it's just been there.
Well, I mean, for the last couple of years, people have been like, oh my gosh, 2026 is really close, right? In 2010, 2026 seems really far away. In 2019, it doesn't seem that far away.
Yeah.
So people have been really nervous for the last 5 years or so and frantically trying to negotiate. And it's just not gone very well. There was a time when it was very much 6 states against California. And then the dynamics have shifted to where it's now upper basin against lower basin. And which goes to show, which is why I as much as this sounds like gloom and doom, it does go to show that, look, in 2019, we all pulled together and we came up with the drought contingency plan. So as much as it looks bad in this moment, I still remain hopeful because you never know. The history of the Colorado River Basin has largely been people doing really stupid things until they can't afford to do stupid things anymore, and then they pull together. I'm still hopeful that that'll happen.
Okay, well, that's good to hear. A second ago, you talked about how 2026 is starting to look very close over the last 5 years, and people are getting frantic. I would like to talk about some of that frantic energy. I think broadly, when people talk about water shortages or think about water shortages, they conceptualize it as impacting the length of their shower or how often they can water their lawn. Obviously, as you've noted before, water has a lot more to do than it comes down to more than just the faucet. So what do water shortages mean in people's lives outside the home, in agriculture, in energy, in the economy at large?
So I get this a lot. So having worked in water my entire career, I will tell you that even 7 years ago, when people would go, what do you do? Like, what kind of law do you practice? And I would go, water law. People would go, oh, that's kind of a narrow niche little area. How interesting. I didn't even know there was a water law. That doesn't happen anymore. Now when I go, I'm a water lawyer, people are like, do I need to sell my house? Are we all going to die? And so something...
Good questions.
Yeah. So public awareness is at a peak that I've ever seen in my career. People are really aware and really concerned about water right now. And they will very understandably ask me, what can I do? And I think that when they ask that question, they're usually thinking the way you were just talking, which is, should I take shorter showers? Should I turn the faucet off while I'm brushing my teeth? Here's the thing that Arizonans need to understand. The water that's going down your drain is probably the water you need to worry about the least.
Okay.
Because that water gets recycled. Arizona's really good at recycling its wastewater. So the water that goes down the drain while you're showering and brushing your teeth, that water isn't going to get wasted. We're going to capture that water again and we're going to reuse it. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't be water efficient. It's good for every desert dwelling person to keep water and its value and its importance in the front of their mind. But that's the area you should be the least worried about. At your home level, what's the water you should be most worried about? 2 kinds. First of all, leaks. If you've got a leak, we lose a lot of water to leaks. You need to be really proactive about addressing leaks. The second thing you need to be worried about is your outdoor water use. 70% of your water consumption at your home is happening outside. So more efficient outdoor landscaping is the place where we can get the most savings at sort of the household level. Now, even then, your home is not the water problem.
Mm-hmm.
Now, some people will fly over the Western United States, they'll look down on big cities like Los Angeles or Phoenix and Las Vegas, and they'll think, what a waste. How can we have these giant cities in the middle of the desert? Or they'll fly over and they'll see all of this lush farmland, and they'll think, what a waste. How can we have these farms in the middle of the desert? If you don't like growing food in the desert and building cities in the desert, your beef is with 10,000 years of human civilization. Because the way we learn to live together is on the banks of the Nile, the Tigris, the Euphrates, and the Indus. Desert rivers are the oldest cities.
Yeah.
And there's a reason we grow food on desert riverbanks. We don't grow it despite the climate. We grow it because of the climate. It's a great place to grow food because there isn't frost and there isn't freezes and there isn't floods. We get a really sustainable, normal, stable weather where we can grow a lot of food. So when you fly over and you look at all of these big cities, we've largely disconnected growth from water consumption, meaning that the city of Phoenix right now uses significantly less water now than it did in the 1950s.
Okay.
Significantly less. Part of that is about getting more efficient, fewer grassy lawns and, fewer leaky, washing machines. But most of it is we just keep retiring farmland and replacing it with houses or other industrial uses. And those are just a lot more water efficient than farmland. Somewhere between 70 and 75% of all of, depending on where you're at, of all the water that's consumed, fresh water consumed in Arizona, goes to irrigated agriculture.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're an Arizonan and you're worried about, where can we achieve savings and be more water secure? The answer is in agriculture and to a lesser extent in energy consumption. Those are our two big water consumers. People be like, oh, what about golf courses? If golf courses, the entire Colorado River Basin uses less than 120,000 acre feet for golfing. If you eliminated every golf course in the Colorado River Basin, you would solve zero problems.
Wow.
A bunch of people would lose their jobs, and we would lose a bunch of tourist revenue, and no water problems would get solved at all. Most of those golf courses now are using recycled wastewater anyways. The golf courses are not the problem. So they use less than 120,000 acre feet. Alfalfa alone in the Colorado River Basin uses 1.5 million acre feet. So the place where you can get the most water savings is in agriculture. Now, right now, somebody listening to us is going to go, oh, well, then it's those greedy farmers using all that water. We are all beneficiaries of the work that farmers do.
Mm-hmm.
And if farmers take a cut to their water supply, all of us will pay for it because it will show up in your grocery bills. So if we decide, hey, alfalfa's getting too much water and we cut back the amount of alfalfa grow, you will pay a lot more for milk and cheese and dairy and beef in the grocery stores. And you're thinking, well, why don't we just move it to a wetter place like Georgia? Well, Georgia has a much more variable weather condition. Georgia would get 3 or 4 alfalfa cuttings a year. We get 11 or 12.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a much better place to grow alfalfa. Not only that, but alfalfa is a very salt-resilient crop, so the water that we have, the Colorado River, is very salty.
Yeah.
So if we keep putting Colorado River water on top of our soil, we'll get salt buildup in the soil. We'll poison our soil so that we can't keep growing. Alfalfa is salt-resilient, and the way that we irrigate it allows us to leach salt out of the soil. So if we're going to replace alfalfa with more water-efficient crops, we're going to have another salt problem. I guess the point I'm trying to get is anybody who's looking at this and going, oh, it's such an easy solution, just grow less alfalfa or have fewer golf courses or don't build as many houses. If you think the solution is easy, you don't understand the problem.
Everything has a ripple effect with this. Okay, so I am a little annoyed that golf courses aren't a problem because you just took away one of the reasons I have to hate golf. But that's neither here nor there. So I wanted to ask about AI.
Sure.
Because there's been growing attention on how water intensive data centers are, especially those supporting AI. How should planners be accounting for emerging high demand users like this when they're renegotiating these water rights?
So up to now, data centers are a relatively small portion of most cities' water consumption. In terms of their municipal and industrial water users, data centers don't represent a huge part of it. Most of the water savings, most of the water efficiencies are still to be found in, first of all, irrigated agriculture, second of all, in energy consumption. Most of the data centers that have been moving into Arizona, as controversial as they have been, most of them are aware of how controversial they are, and they are low to no water consuming data centers. So they're cooling without using that much water. So there are some data centers in the world that are very water intensive. They use evaporative cooling and they use a lot of water. Most of the data centers that are coming into Arizona know that that's a death knell for them if they come in. So they tend to be pretty water efficient.
To begin with. Okay.
To begin with.
Yeah.
I think what you will see is you will see more cities that will basically say, look, if we're going to do zoning or if we're going to do permits, we're basically going to demand you, data center. If you're going to come here, you must be a low or no water coolant system. Or if you are going to use evaporative cooling, then you need to be a net zero water consumer, which means you need to buy out other water inefficient uses, or you need to invest in fixing a bunch of leaks, or you need to invest in bringing a new water supply online. So there are ways in which a city can create requirements or incentives for data centers to invest in low or no water consuming technology. And the data center can be relatively sustainable. Here's the challenge with data centers is if a data center comes in and they are low or no water cooling, or they achieve a net zero water consumption through other means, usually the no or low water cooling technology is very water efficient, but it's a high energy using technology. So instead of using water to cool, they use energy to cool. So that will put a higher and higher strain on our power grid to power these new data centers. And the challenge there is that, well, we either need to add capacity to our grid, and some of that added capacity might be natural gas plants, or it might be modular nuclear plants. Well, those are all water intensive.
Yeah.
And so while the data center itself might be very water efficient, since it's using so much energy, its indirect water consumption might actually be relatively high. Now, this gets right back to the nature of these trade-offs that we have in water, which is, if you want Phoenix to be like the semiconductor capital of the world and have this cutting edge new economy that's based on data centers and AI, we can do that. But you are probably going to have to pay a lot more money in the grocery store, and housing prices will continue to go up. Or we can have a lot more affordable housing and not have as much of that high-tech economy and have less alfalfa. Or you can have really affordable vegetables and milk in the grocery store, but a lot less computing capacity with a lot less data centers. I'm a dad. I've got 4 kids, and my 2 oldest kids are adults now, and they're making big decisions all the time, making big decisions about where am I going to go to college and what should I study and what's my career going to be. And the advice I try to give my kids all the time now is life isn't about having all of your dreams come true. Mm. It's about having the most important ones come true. I tell them, look, I wanted to own an avocado and pineapple grove in the Dominican Republic and be a beach bum, but I wasn't going to marry your mom if that's what I did. She is my dream. Mm-hmm. She's the dream I wanted to have come true. And I had to give up a pretty cool dream in order to get the one that mattered most. And Arizona and the Western United States, we are really at that point. We have enough water to do a lot of great things, but we don't have enough water to do every good thing. And some good things are going to get left behind. And it's easy. And you want to tell yourself a fairy tale where there's a villain and there's a victim and there's a hero. And it's easier to make these water decisions if you can say that farmers are bad guys, or data centers are bad guys, or real estate developers are bad guys, or tree-hugging environmentalists are bad guys. If it's so tempting to make this that fairy tale, and it just isn't. There's a bunch of good people who want to have industries like data centers and alfalfa that help you and give you good things, and they all consume water. And we can balance them out, but if some of them lose off in this battle, the least we can do for them is to not shake our finger at them like they're villains, like they were the bad guys. The least we can do is say, this is hard. You have had to be the dream that we've given up, and we should at least help you make a transition rather than say you got what you deserve.
At the very start of this, we talked about how the Colorado River Compact in general made some bad assumptions. So I'm curious as to what role scientific forecasts play today, hydrology, climate projections, like where do those come into legal decision making? And are our current laws and agreements agile enough to respond to them?
One thing I tell people all the time when people ask about water problems is I tell them the fundamental challenge, if I could boil it down, is that we have 19th century laws, we have 20th century infrastructure, and we have a 21st century population and climate. And that's the problem. Those laws, those 19th century laws, they existed for a really good reason. If you're like, hey, the law is whoever calls dibs, that's a really great law for settling a desert.
Absolutely.
Because it encourages people to run into the desert and invest in developing water supplies. It's a terrible law for managing a desert.
Yeah.
And so the law did what it was designed to do. It got a lot of people to move out here and build. But now you have a lot of senior water rights that get locked up in areas that they need to be shifted, and it becomes a very rigid system. Our projection abilities are rapidly improving. So we're getting better at modeling the climate, better and better at modeling the river. But the challenge with the law is both that our laws have kind of ossified and they aren't flexible enough to adapt to changing conditions. To build in that flexibility, we need more political cohesion, more cultural cohesion. We need more friendship. And I know that sounds trite, but when friends are in the room who have a built-up amount of trust with each other, it's easier to build an adaptive system because it's built on trust. And so a lack of trust amongst Americans, between political parties, between states, between rural and urban people, this strained trust affects our ability to adapt to a new and a changing climate. Now, while our models are getting better and we're improving in the way that we forecast, oftentimes the fights and the place where we don't trust each other is inside of that model. So the models themselves are simulations. When people ask me about a model, I'm like, well, listen, do you play Madden on the Madden video game? I'm like, listen, if you play one, or let's since I'm a basketball fan, let's do the NBA Live. So
Sure.
If you play NBA, if I play one NBA Live season and the Phoenix Suns win the NBA championship, does that mean that you should bet on the Phoenix Suns to win the NBA championship?
Probably
not. If I have the computer play the computer for to do 5 seasons and the Suns win 3 out of 5, should you? Maybe. If I have a super sophisticated computer that plays the 82-game season plus the playoffs, and it can simulate weather and it can simulate injuries, and it plays 1,000,000 seasons, and the Suns win 62% of the time.
Good bet.
Good bet. But it's still a bet.
Yeah.
And the challenge with our models have been, our models are still bets.
Mm-hmm.
And the challenge with the model is absolutely wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And people will go, oh, well, then you shouldn't trust the model. But the problem is our models have been usually underestimating the problem. So the model is usually telling us it's going to be bad, and then Mother Nature shows up and it's worse. And so inside of the model are lots of assumptions. There are lots of assumptions about how people are going to use water and how much it's going to rain or snow and how reservoirs are going to get operated. So oftentimes the model isn't a tool to solve a fight. The model itself becomes a fight.
Okay. So earlier you were talking about how, the dibs method was great for settling a desert. If things are renegotiated and we come to an agreement, all those water rights are not going to be wiped away, right?
I wouldn't think so.
Really?
Look, there is a possibility. First of all, there are people with low priority water rights.
Okay.
So let's talk about a really scary scenario.
Let's do it. Yeah.
So in 1968, the Colorado River Basin Project Act was passed. What happened in the 60s was Arizona was like, hey, we have a bunch of water rights in the Colorado River now. We have a right to 2.8 million acre feet of water. But it doesn't do us that much good to have it in the river. We need to get it to Phoenix and Tucson, to where all the people live. We got to build a giant canal. The problem is we don't have enough money to build a giant canal. We need the federal government to build it. They're rich. The problem is that the biggest congressional delegation is California, which means California's got to get in the game to help us get federal government money. So we go hat in hand to California in the 60s and we go, California, will you please talk Daddy into building us a big canal so that we can use our water? And California does the villain laugh and says, we'll give you your little canal in exchange for your immortal soul. And California made a deal, and they said, we will support the construction of the Central Arizona Project if you, Central Arizona Project, agree that you're the junior user on the river. So if there's not enough water for everyone, you take all the cuts first.
Got it.
So there is an argument that says, hey, if these shortage sharing guidelines all go away and we wake up a New Year's Day 2027 and there's not enough water, there are people who are arguing, turn off the Central Arizona Project. 40% of Phoenix's water supply. Turn it off. They're the junior user. Now, there are other arguments that Arizona can make about why they might not be the junior user, or there are certainly lots of economic and political arguments they can make about why they're not the junior user. But it is possible that there are people who are junior priority users who will just get their water cut. People who are Pinal County farmers, they are low priority Central Arizona Project subcontractors. This tier 1 shortage we're living in right now, they have lost their access to the Colorado River, and they are scrambling to find a way to keep their way of life afloat. So the consequences of these negotiations will almost certainly mean that there are at least some people who used to get water who won't now.
What should happen with these discussions and negotiations in 2026? Now, from a scholar, try to do it from a scholar's perspective. Like you noted that you're a proud Arizonan and that is where your loyalties lie. But what do you think should happen? What is an equitable solution for all the basin states?
I'm going to get a little nerdy on you.
Okay.
So years ago, we had a bunch of, you had broadcast bandwidth. So you had big major TV broadcasters like NBC and CBS and ABC that were consuming a whole bunch of TV broadcasting bandwidth. But you also had a bunch of like small, like local television guys, right?
Sure.
Like Wayne's World from Saturday Night Live. Like
local access.
Yeah, local access channels. Well, as broadcast bandwidth became more and more valuable, as the internet was coming online, as Wi-Fi was coming online, and the ability to broadcast, that bandwidth became more valuable. You had a lot of small, low-value broadcasters who everybody was looking at and going, are we really going to keep Wayne's World on the air? And that's going to be the thing that gets in the way of developing Wi-Fi and high-speed internet? That can't possibly be what we're going to do. But they have a right. These small community access channels had a right to, they had a contract to broadcast. What we had was basically a reverse auction. Was like, can we buy out these smaller access guys? How much money is it going to take? Who here is willing to sell out their contract to open it up? And a lot of people raised their hand, said, we're willing to sell out. Something like this might work in the Colorado River Basin to say, look, we need to shift from some lower value uses into some higher value uses, and we're going to offer a deal to a lot of these lower value water uses to see if we can buy them out to free up more water. That sounds economically like a pretty good idea. It worked with broadcast bandwidth. Why can't it work with water? It seems like a totally sensible, rational economic approach. People are crazy about water. They're not rational. And so the reason I don't know that this plan translates that easily is that people will go kind of nuts about their water supply. Water is their way of life. It's a cultural, it's a political resource, right? Water is everything that gold and oil and silver and wheat is. It is a valuable, saleable commodity. But it is also everything that poetry and music and religion and family is. It's a symbol. It's a symbol of sovereignty. It's a symbol of purity. It's a symbol of culture. It's a symbol of life. And we don't throw lumps of coal at each other in the wintertime, and we don't squirt each other with gasoline in the summertime, and nobody gets baptized in uranium. It's a different resource. You feel about it in a different way. And so any plan to sort of reallocate water rights based on higher uses is going to have to grapple with the irrationality, the rational irrationality of the way people feel about their water. And add on top of it this, which is, if you're ever looking for a really funny video that will teach you something about water, have you ever seen the show Drunk History?
Yes.
So there's a very funny episode of Drunk History with Jack Black that talks about the Owens Valley water scandal in California, which was these developers in Los Angeles tricked a bunch of farmers in the Owens Valley and then stole the water and gave it to Los Angeles. Long story short. And a lot of people are like, oh, this is the scandal of these farmers getting ripped off. But the real story isn't that farmers got ripped off. The real story is farmers got paid for their water rights. Who got hurt? It wasn't the farmer. The farmer walks away with the water. It's everybody around the farmer. It's the tractor repairman and the fertilizer salesman and the school teacher. It's all these people who were supporting the agricultural community. Their lives were destroyed when the farmers all sold their water rights to higher value uses. But they didn't get a check.
Yeah.
So the other thing we have to be really careful about if we're thinking about buying out a bunch of quote unquote low value water uses is not only the understandable feelings that people will have about that water, but who are the people out on the peripheries of that water transaction who are going to be hurt but aren't going to get paid?
The ripple effect. Yeah. For someone who lives in the Western U.S. and maybe doesn't think about or isn't super plugged into water policy, what's one thing you want them to understand?
Trade-offs are inherent. There is no way out of this. If there's anybody out there telling you you can have cheap groceries and cheap power and lots of computing capacity and really affordable housing and no impact on your ability to go fishing and whitewater rafting and enjoy all the beautiful natural scenic areas of Arizona, you can have all of those things and it won't cost you anything. If there's somebody out there telling you that, they're lying. They're selling you something that's just not real. And here's part of the challenge is I love the water experts in Arizona. I'm one of them. The water nerds, we call ourselves water buffaloes. It's a great community, and I love being a part of this community, but we have a really bad habit. We have a bad habit of when normal, average, everyday, non-water dork Arizonans ask us questions, we have a really bad habit of kind of taking this condescending, pat you on the head, this is so complicated, you'll never possibly understand it. And the reality is a lot of water policy is just insanely complicated.
Mm-hmm.
But there is an area of water policy where every Arizonan needs to have a voice. And that is, what is this future? What are the dreams that we want most? And what are we willing to give up in order to get those dreams? If every Arizonan will come together and give us that North Star to guide us about what our future is, then all the complex decisions that have to be made, the water experts can help us get there. So when people ask, Rhett, what can I do in water? I mean, there's lots of things you can do. You can be more efficient outside. You can be more conscious about the way that but the most important thing that you can do is, especially in a year like this, when it's an election year, is expect and demand that anyone who's seeking to lead this state, that they are a real water thinker. That they are, and you know what? Not everybody needs to be a water expert in order to run for public office in Arizona. But you need to at least educate yourself, ask the hard questions, do the research. Water is inherently political, but it is not partisan.
Mm-hmm.
It has nothing to do, or should have nothing to do, with who's a Republican or a Democrat. It creates divisions. It creates divisions between urban and rural users, divisions between different industrial or agricultural sectors, divisions between tribal or non-tribal users. And some of these divisions we just have to work through. The worst thing that we can do in Arizona is to add to the division. So if you want to know a really great way to help Arizona become a water secure state, overcome division and distrust. Pull together and seek leaders who pull us together.
Thank you so much for coming on the show and, breaking down or helping us navigate the really choppy water we find ourselves in. For anyone who wants to go deeper on the future of water in the West, are there any books or articles or resources you recommend for people to get into?
You mean besides Drunk History and Jack Black?
Besides that, yeah.
You know what? First of all, I'm going to make a shameless plug for the Kyle Center for Water Policy. My colleagues at the Kyle Center are just really some of the top-notch water leaders and thinkers. They have something called the Arizona Water Blueprint. It is this really great interactive map that if you look it up, you can answer so many of your questions just by playing around with the layers of this map. And there are regular office hours that allow you to engage with the map and learn how to use it, where your water's coming from, what's your groundwater table like, where you're at, who's governing your water. So I would really encourage people, use the resources of the Kyle Center, use the Kyle Center's Water Blueprint. It's such a fantastic resource. If you're looking, another shameless plug, my book is Just Add Water, Solving the World's Problems Using Its Most Precious Resource. It's a way of helping you see all the ways in which water affects aspects of public policy that you might not think have anything to do with water, like racial equality or public health. I have another book that's going to be coming out soon called Day Zero, How Cities Run Out of Water, which is it's going to be a book about how Cape Town and Mexico City and Chennai, India have faced the risk of running out of water and what are the lessons for cities around the world to have sustainable water supplies. So maybe those are just shameless plugs.
Oh, no, that's great. I'll put those resources in the show notes. Thanks again for coming on the show,
Great.
Rhett.
My pleasure.
Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed the show, please leave us a 5-star review in the podcast app of your choice. If you found us on YouTube, we'd really appreciate a like and a subscribe. Lab Coat Optional is a joint production of all the talented people at the Strategic Marketing and Communications team at Knowledge Enterprise at Arizona State University. Knowledge Enterprise is led by Executive Vice President Sally C. Morton. Until next time, stay curious.